Welcome to Adeptus On-Air, the show where we examine how individuals and companies make decisions that drive their business and personal success. Each week, we connect with notable professionals who pull back the curtain on the industries that Adeptus has been on the cutting edge of for the last 30 years, including music, sports, and entertainment, as well as new emerging markets. Welcome to Adeptus On-Air. I'm James Walker, and today we have a special guest in Nathan Sherratt, who is the managing director of the third team and also an official yourself. So a lot to dig into and a lot of work that you've done in soccer and what we call soccer, but football in a worldwide sport. That's probably we're going to do that a few times today as far as, that part of it. But Nathan, you're out in the UK, where it's football primarily. So just kind of let's start at the beginning, because I know just even myself as a kid, just dreaming of playing professional sports, and a lot of kids have the dream of playing professional sports, but not a lot of people kind of think about the officiating side of it. Growing up, how did you get into it? How did you get into the officiating side?
I think probably in a typical spirit, I sort of did it by accident. I think probably the same as you in terms of growing up. Obviously, football, as you guys call it, soccer, it's the national sport, biggest sport without a shadow of a doubt in England and the UK. And obviously, I think a lot of guys in the US will watch the Premier League. It's a global product, and it's obviously our national sport, and we're really proud of the fact that it's the best league in the world, and that filters right down to grassroots level to young boys playing on a Saturday and Sunday morning. Young boys and girls getting started and really enjoying it. And for me, I was probably the same. As a youngster, I tried to play, but I realised that I didn't have the ability. So for me, it was actually quite difficult. I love football and found it really, really difficult to not be able to play, to not be able to kind of to be involved, and I took some time away. When I was about 12 or 13, realised I couldn't play quite young, I suppose, really, and so I took some time away, but then when I was in high school, as you guys would call it in the US, a friend of mine, his father was an official in semi-professional game, and he said, do you want to do this course? And for me, it was something of it was a preferable thing to be doing rather than working in a shop, on a Saturday and losing my whole Saturday and maybe even my whole weekend, at sort of 14, 15, 16 years of age. And I think that from my perspective, uh, I thought it was great I could get back involved in football, could run around, get fit at the same time. And really sort of that was how my journey started into refereeing, and it was about wanting to be involved in the game again.
That's awesome. And when you say you took a course, just kind of give us a idea of what does that entail. What is the process of going from beginning all the way to the referee as far as education, courses, training, etc.
So I think that from a technical level, when I took the course, and I don't exactly know how different it is now for the youngsters just starting out, but certainly when I started, which is nearly 10 years ago now, 10 years next year since I qualified, um, it was a 2-day course, and there was some, like, I suppose what you call pre-course sort of sessions. 2-day course over a weekend, and pre-course sessions before. Afterwards, also, once we'd completed our first 5 or 6 games, we would then check back in with the football association, to see how we were going, and then we would get our badge, and we would be away, and that was generally how it worked. So probably a total of 3 full days if you take the 2 evenings, and then the probably the 2 full days of the weekend that we took to qualify. So really, quite a short thing, and And I think it's like taking a driving test and getting your driving license, really. You don't really start learning until you're out there on your own doing it, much in the same way that you don't really start to learn how to drive until after you've passed your test. When you're out on the roads for the very first time on your own is when the real learning happens and begins.
That's a good point. I was actually going to ask you, tell me about your first game or your first games, and is there a bit of a rookie nervousness, or do players realize, hey, we have a rookie ref, maybe we can get away with a little more than just what's that like?
The secret is not to tell them, not to let them know, and I think that's always the best way to go about it. I remember where it was. I don't remember the date. I don't remember the away team. I remember the home team. Um, and so I suppose that's kind of the extent of my memory on that first game. But what I do remember is being really excited, being really ready to go. And I think it was because I'd actually had to wait a little while before I could actually referee a game, whereas that's not the case now because what we have in the lower levels is a shortage actually of referees. So it's a little bit more, we can't get them in quickly enough, really. So, but yeah, I think that certainly when I was starting, that was where we were at with it, and yeah, I felt at the time that it was a really exciting event for me to be able to referee the first game, and I remember the feedback I got from my mentor around signals on the field of play, hand signals. Um, Needing to be more pronounced, more bold, more confident, and those were the things that came over time. But yes, I think certainly at the start of my career, it was a really exciting thing, and I just remember being excited more than anything about the opportunity to referee.
Excellent, excellent. Why do you think there's a shortage, or not think, but why do you see a shortage in refereeing in the current pipeline?
I think it's because the level of abuse towards match officials has kind of increased massively over the last probably 5, 6 years in particular. Um, and there's a number of reasons behind that. I think particularly for this country, there's a number of reasons behind that. I think that what we've seen politically a change in this country, and I think probably the US has seen a similar change in terms of populism, post-truth, polarization in a political sense has led to basically a, a lot more of kind of people being emboldened to share views which may be discriminatory, whether they be racist, sexist, homophobic, whatever it may be. And I think that comes from people in positions of power and leadership basically lying to their public. And I think that everybody seems to think that it's okay to be dishonest and to say what they think without a filter. And I don't know what you think, but certainly I get the feeling that, when I was growing up, and I was at school, 20 years ago, 10 and 20 years ago, actually I feel that society was generally a more tolerant place, and I think it's become less tolerant over the past, sort of 5 to 10 years, with the sort of political changes and things like that. And I think that we had a lot of problems, obviously, with the pandemic as well. A lot of pent up rage and aggression that players had during that pandemic. Then coming out on the field of play, it made it very difficult for referees. Because I think referees play the same role that the police do in society, but they don't have the same powers. And I think it's very, very difficult to manage people who are angry and aggressive and want to do damage and don't have any intention of playing the game, but want to just express rage and anger, which we found after the pandemic. So I think there's been a lot of difficult things that have happened over the last probably 10 years or slightly less. And it's made refereeing a lot more difficult, certainly since it was certainly a lot worse, and certainly a lot since I qualified, as I say, 9 years ago next year.
Yeah, that's interesting because we're definitely living in a seemingly a more divisive world for whatever. you know, situations that you had mentioned. I wanted to ask you, and that's interesting how that spilled in has spilled into sports as well. I never thought about that in terms of, you know, players' aggression and everything. You deal with athletes in the most, I guess, competitive. They're most competitive and emotional states. You know, for that 3 hours, they're ultra competitive, ultra, kind of amped up. How do you and you know your colleagues and the people that you train, how do they stay? How do you teach them to stay calm, and cool in those situations when the environment around you, you know, the other players that are, you know, and the coaches as well, are at their high, you know, pretty much their highest competitive states?
I think that the most important factor in it all is trying to maintain focus. Because I think if you have focus and you are driven to succeed in terms of the goals that you set out, whether it be over the period of a month or the period of a season, or just those goals for that game, what do we want to achieve in that game? What do we want to get out of this game? Then I think that you can have a base that can't be penetrated or permeated, you know? You are so focused and so driven to get the job done that that these things can't hurt you and can't affect you. And I think, you know, I work very hard with the referees that I coach to put this mindset in place for them, and to try and get them to be really driven in that way. I think some of the things that we really talk about is who they are, you know, at their core, you know, what they have, you know, what are their values, what do they look like when they're at their best, all of those different aspects that we do, and then we try to promote the qualities that they possess, and we work with them to get more and more confident. So I think that, you know, that's probably the biggest bit of advice I can really give them, and we can work on it. And I think every referee that I work with is different, and they've all got different challenges. And what I'm always trying to work with the referees on is how we can get them and understand the qualities that they have, so that where they feel their areas of weakness are, or I see areas that we can improve through talking to them, we can be really targeted and really focused in those areas. Because I don't think that you get a great deal of value by, you know, just working on a general profile, and working with people on things that they may already have a lot of strengths in those areas, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and that's really big as far as digging into the kind of psychological aspect to make sure they
Yeah.
improve. I guess we're kind of going down the road, but tell me about the third team. Tell us about your company, how, you know, how it came about, and you know its purpose, and how it's really helped, you know, officiating in the UK.
So really, it was something that happened in 2019, and I'd been refereeing my own game, which had quite a violent assault between two youth players in it. Um, and at the time, I didn't get the support that I needed, and it was nobody's fault. It just happened to be that the people who would have been there to support me were not available. Now, I wasn't a big networker, and I wasn't well networked as a referee at the time, and I didn't have a lot of knowledge of, you know, colleagues and people who I could lean on for support and guidance. Um, so that was quite a difficult thing for me, and I think, you know, the police were involved in this incident. It was a really serious thing,
Wow.
and I think I thought to myself that a younger referee may have packed in completely at that stage, and not refereed another game, and consigned their refereeing chapter to another part of their life that they're not, you know, it's not part of their life now. And I think it just so happened that at the time I was leaving a job. I'd decided that, you know, the job I was working in at the time wasn't the right one for me. Didn't like the environment that I was working in. Didn't think it was just the right thing for me, and it just so happened that that opportunity opened up, and then the chance came for me to, just to actually set up my own business. And so I was on a bit of a journey of exploration and change at that stage in early 2019 when I did set up the business, and for me it was a key moment for sort of the changes I made in my personal life when I began to understand my autism, and I also decided to set up a business and get involved in the small business community in the northeast of England, and make network, um, and get guidance and support, and people saying you've got this idea, you should start a business with it, and so in May 2019, that's exactly what I did, and I started to get work and to build up, a profile, and then the pandemic came, in early 2020, so we were badly affected by that because I've been doing a lot of face-to-face workshops, traveling around delivering workshops at that stage. And that was when I had to go online and make those changes, and just improve, I think, um, the sort of global presence of the business. But that's exactly what it did. It became an international business with the
Wow.
COVID. So that was something that I still have now. And then probably fast forward 12 to 18 months, and I started to deliver one-to-one coaching, almost like a counselor or a therapist for referees, but I see myself as a bit like a sports psychologist for referees, but it was that one-to-one coaching that we would talk about. So um, I think there's been a real strong evolution, and we're now at 4.5 years in
Yeah.
business, and I now work. There's no continent in the world I haven't touched, apart from
Wow.
obviously Antarctica, and obviously I'm working with groups, and I'm working with, um, kind of, uh, individuals on a one-to-one basis. Speaking like you and I are now through online meeting channels, and that means that with the UK being sort of in the middle of the sort of international time zones. I can be in Australia in the morning, and finish my day in the US as I am with you now.
Sure.
Um, and uh, and obviously that's a big thing for me. So um, I'm loving working with the groups, and I'm loving working with a one-to-one sort of angle. And it's just in the last week, to give you an idea of the diversity. It's just in the last week that I've been speaking with an Australian kind of state
Okay.
football association in Australia, wanting to bring me over to deliver some training for the referees from UK to Australia,
Wow.
and also I'm working with some Gaelic football officials in Europe at their conference in Belgium in January as well. So that just gives you an idea of, it's not just football or soccer; it's all sports that I'm working with officials from, um, and um, it's in a diverse sort of range of locations, and obviously for me, getting the passport stamped in a number of different continents and countries and what have you. It's a really exciting time.
Yeah, that's phenomenal, and I don't know if you've been following, but the National Football League, the NFL here in the U.S. is the most popular sport here in our country, and they're having official issues, controversies, almost on a weekly basis right now. Just it's at the point where the players are complaining heavily. So maybe there's something here as well. What so spanning all the continents and the variants there, what would you say are the two or three biggest issues you see that have come up the most for referees today?
I think the biggest thing, without a shadow of a doubt, head and shoulders above everything else, is confidence. Confidence is always going to be probably the big challenge. And you talk about the situation that you just described there within NFL, and that will massively erode the confidence of the officials, because people questioning your credibility to make decisions, people question your integrity, and it's constant. it feels like it's never ending.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, from that perspective, that can be very, very difficult, and that's where it leads into all different types of situations. So you have a number of facets that come with confidence in regards to when these things that I've just described are happening. That then means that officials are not having the courage of their convictions to kind of make decisions because they're second guessing themselves constantly. I want to blow the whistle, but is it right? Is it wrong? I'm not sure. The reaction of the players, it's always putting doubt in my mind, and that's when you end up in a complete rut and things become incredibly difficult to manage. So, I think that probably the big challenge is certainly around confidence. I think one of the other big challenges we have, and again, it comes from what you described there within the NFL, which is all about you know um, match officials worried about their safety,
Mm,
making decisions. But am I safe? Will I be safe? Will I get back to my car safely? Is anybody going to come and attack me after games? And I've worked with clients in the US, and I have to say that one of the big things I know that my clients in the US fear is, there's quite often they don't know who's got a gun.
mm,
Um, and so that's something that's otherworldly for obviously us in the UK, where guns are only farmers have guns in the UK. There's just, but obviously it's a very, very different situation in the United States. Um, but it's like these different challenges that you have to appreciate that affect officials at all levels. And what I have to say is, again, I'm using the same example, but you talk about what's happening in NFL. These things very much have a top-down approach. It affects grassroots officials when things are going wrong at the top level, and it puts more and more pressure on grassroots officials when things are going wrong at the top level.
yeah.
So these things filter down and affect everybody who's involved in the game, whether it's professional or recreational.
Yeah, wow, the safety aspect and come to think about it, I mean, there's 50, 60,000 people in these, these stadiums, and the referee does have to get back to their car if if they cost the home team or if they made a call against the home team or something like that, they have to think about. These are all things that I think the general population that just enjoys the game doesn't really think about, on the refereeing side. Um, I want to ask you as a referee on the field and as a crew, does a crew know when they're having a good game, when they're kind of in that flow state and like, yeah, we're nailing it, we're doing our jobs tremendous, we haven't missed a call, or is it just one of those things to where you just kind of go through the game and kind of go back and you have to look at it to see if if you had a good game? Like what does that feel like when you're having a good game as a referee and as a crew?
I think probably the best indicator you can have is when the players are not on your back too much, when there's not that much questioning of decisions and things like that. They are the ones where you would say generally, you know, you're having a good game. But ultimately, it's about survival. You can have 89 minutes of a 90-minute football or soccer match, and you can make a mistake in the last 30 seconds of the game, and that's all anybody will ever remember. So that's the cruelty of it, really, in terms of, in a 90-minute game, you would have between 300 and 350 decisions to make.
Wow.
And if you get one of them wrong at the end of the game and it's a key match decision, such as a penalty kick or a red card, then, you know, that's all anybody remembers. They don't remember the other, 349 decisions that you got absolutely correct. So those
Wow.
things are very difficult and quite hard to manage and quite difficult to kind of get your head round. But like I say, it's about the players being, if they're not talking to you and not appealing your decisions and they're generally accepting the decisions that you make, and then it gives you an indicator that you're on the right lines. But being honest, you're probably not 100% safe until you've blown that final whistle and you're walking back towards the dressing room. It's really, really that simple. But what I will say as well is that um, you know, there's many opportunities to review footage after games now, so we have good opportunities to assess and reflect on our performances in that regard. But we're just constantly trying to survive more than anything, and make sure that we take our time and get the correct decisions. And one of the most crucial factors is in any real walk of life is that, we just have to keep communicating with each other throughout the game. Particularly games where perhaps it's 0-0 going into the final 5 or 10 minutes of the game, you know that each team's going to maybe take more risks, and that the game could become more open, and that might mean that there's more likelihood of a key match decision needing to be made. A red card, or a penalty kick, or something big happening in the game, and it's about being switched on. So we're always talking to each other and encouraging each other, and promoting each other throughout the game to say, look, let's hang in there. We've got 5 minutes to go. Let's keep our eyes open. Let's be switched on. Let's be sharp. And just really motivating each other as match officials working together in a team, that we try and get the decisions right.
Wow, man, I'm learning so much, man. Next sporting event I'm gonna watch the officials and not the actual game, just to kind of see that kind of game within a game, and how stressful an environment that it sounds like it is for officiating. That's amazing. Uh, Give me the honest answer here, and I know you've been giving me honest answers the whole time, but do you officiate a Messi or Ronaldo differently than the rest of the players? Do you officiate superstar players a little differently? If so, how? If not, why not? Um, how does that happen when you have, a Hall of Fame talent, a Messi, Ronaldo, who are clearly kind of a cut above, the rest of the players on the field?
I think that, with great technical players like you described there, there is certainly an aspect that, you have to look at, and it's mainly because they will move about the pitch at a speed different to other players. So you have to be aware that the slightest touch for them is enough to actually send them to the ground
Mhm.
with more ferocity than perhaps it would be another player not travelling so quickly, not so technically gifted. Um, and you have to be aware of that. But I think no special treatment, absolutely not. And with quality players that can tend to be more. I don't know how you would say it in American vocabulary, but more whingy. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Kind of they in your ear a lot,
yeah,
moaning, complaining. Yeah.
yep.
So I think that's a big problem that you can have sometimes with those players, and that's why I think sometimes they will have respect for you if you stand up to them and say, "Look, I'm not having you. Just go away. Don't talk to me. I'm not interested in hearing you sort of complaining all the time. I'm going to referee the game. I'm not going to tell you how to play your game, but I don't expect you to tell me how to referee this game, and just work forward in that way." And generally, you get respect from players who say, "Okay, well, can't say fairer than that. Really, he's gonna referee the game, and he's gonna let us get on with playing it." Then I think that makes sense for a lot of people. So yeah, I would say that you would never try to treat any player of any kind differently to any other player. But you have to be aware that where players are quicker and more technically gifted than others, then the way that they react if contact happens and things like that is something that you have to be really switched on to.
Yeah, no, that's a good point on that. And I think as we watch all sports and you see like a LeBron, or you see a Michael Jordan, or you see a Patrick Mahomes or a Tom Brady, and soccer, Messi, Ronaldo, fans always wonder, do they get preferential treatment as superstar players? Um, e- every year in sports you kind of see technological advances with different stats and things like that. AI is a big topic now throughout the world for various reasons. Do you think AI would eventually get involved in officiating in some capacity, if not a full capacity, a partial capacity? Do you kind of see technology evolving to where that's a possibility?
Well, we're already seeing that with the introduction of the sort of uh, semi automatic offside decisions that get made, and that's something that I think is sometimes helpful and is sometimes not so helpful. But I think that we need to be careful with AI because sport is an emotional, passionate game, and you can never put that into machines. And I think that it's always really important to have people who are in and amongst it who can feel the temperature of a game,
Hmm.
can breathe a game and understand the pace of the game. And I think that one of the probably best parts of officiating, one of the most respected parts of officiating, is kind of officials who officiate games to the spirit of the laws rather than to the letter of the laws. And that keeps the game flowing. That keeps people on.
Elaborate. Sorry, Nate. Elaborate on that. That's a very good point. I want our listeners to be able to understand what
Yeah,
you mean. The spirit versus the letter of the law.
yeah. So I think that in football or soccer, which is the game that I officiate, we have the laws of the game, which is a book written by IFAB, and it has all the laws of football, or the rules, as some people would say, but laws are the correct term um, for the game. And in that book is written down to the letter, as the phrase goes, what officials should do in every circumstance within the game. And you have within that. I always describe it as like a Bible or a Quran or any type of religious book, and I always describe officials as almost like priests, um, or faith leaders, and in respects to the fact that every faith leader is going to interpret their book, whether it's the Quran or the Bible or whatever it might be, in a different way, and they're going to interpret what that religious script says in a different way. And it's very much the same with officials. So it's written down what they want you to do, but there is always flexibility in that. So that is what we would call the spirit of the law. And it's also about good management of people, really, in terms of being on a pitch, because you you kind of want to make sure that as many people stay on the pitch as possible rather than sort of sending people off and disallowing goals and everything, because that's not what people are there to see. That's not what people pay their money to watch. They pay their money to watch um, goals, and they want to see all the best players staying on the pitch in a competitive game throughout. They don't want to see a referee sending people off, disallowing goals, making the game a mockery. So I think that one of the big challenges that we have to kind of look at with AI, which is what you originally asked me about, is making sure that we still have people there so that the game doesn't become robotic, arbitrary, and every game is exactly the same as every other game. What we want is to actually, we want to see, advantages being played in games. We want to see management of players to keep everybody on the pitch, to make every contest as competitive as possible. And so that's what we have to guard against with AI, I feel. And it's very, very important. So I think it can help us in certain areas, absolutely. Things like goal line technology to make sure the balls cross the line and things like that is where it comes in very, very useful. But I think we need to be very careful about replacing on-field match officials, because we want every single decision to be absolutely correct, because I think a lot of fans wouldn't like an arbitrary letter of the law type approach. That I think if we put AI in full control of the game, that would be what we would get.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Agree 100% with that, and that's really across every sport. If AI was fully involved in each sport, you kind of get a robotic uh, way to officiate a game, which probably isn't the best way. I agree with that. Since we're discussing the future, last question I have for you here: where do you see soccer officiating making strides in the next, say, decade? Um, where do you see soccer officiating in general, in the next decade? Where can it grow? Where are the trends? What improvements you think will be made, et cetera, over the next few years?
Well, I think the use of video assistant referee in sport is still less than a decade old. So if you're asking me about another decade to come, I think I would like to think that we will have sort of nuanced our approach to the way that we operate this system, because it still requires human operation to use video assistant referee. So I think that we need to be aware of that, and we need to make sure that we train people in the correct way to use the technology to the best of its ability. And I think, you know, I know that it's a growing sport, but a very, very small sport in the US at the moment. But cricket's a sport that's had video technology and Hawkeye technology, which is also in tennis. Those things have been in cricket and tennis for over a decade now, and I think a lot of people, in general terms, will accept the accuracy of those tools, and will see that over a period of time they've become incredibly useful. I know that it's obviously in use in American football, but I must say that I don't follow that as closely as perhaps the listeners and you do. So I don't know how advanced it is in that, but obviously you're telling me a lot of the same things that I hear about football in terms of fans not necessarily agreeing with the decisions made, even with the technology. Um, and so I think that there's always going to be things you can do better. So I think the evolutions that we'll see with VAR over the next decade will be things like looking at how we can hear the voice of the match officials when they're making the decisions and coming together to make those decisions.
Mm.
Um, you know, I think one of the other things that we will get better at is the actual processes of reviewing decisions, so that we can make it as efficient and as quick as possible, but also retain that level of scrutiny that we need to make sure that we're getting the decisions right. Because one of the big mantras within refereeing and officiating in general is a rushed decision is often a wrong decision. So we need to make sure we get take our time to make sure we get it right, but at the same time, as I say, become more efficient. So I think there's a lot of different bits and pieces that kind of come with that, and a lot of bits that we have a lot of moving parts, I would say, that need to come together over the next 10 years. But my big hope for football, and for any sports really that has just introduced video technology, is that we can see the constant evolution of those things, and within a decade we've got the most efficient version of it in operation, really.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think you're spot on. You have a really good view of where things are going and what things are needed. Nathan, can you tell the audience, your social channels, where they can find the third team, where they can find, information on you
Yeah.
in general?
So they can visit the third team .co.uk, and on that website they'll find a weekly blog that I've written every week for 4 years now, over 4 years since I started the business, and
Wow.
always writing about different aspects of psychological performance when it comes to officiating. And they can connect with the third team on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. But they can also connect with myself, Nathan Sherratt, on LinkedIn. And I really welcome the engagement and the messages that I get on a regular basis about the content that I produce, and also about the work that I've done. So it's always a really positive thing, and something that I really love to engage with people and officials all over the world. And it's been a massive learning process and an eye-opening process for me to engage with people. So I always welcome that, and always look forward to it.
That's awesome, Nathan, and great insight, great passion, great knowledge on everything officiating, Nathan, and thank you so much for joining Adeptus on Air.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Adeptus on Air. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. If you have a question related to this episode or have a request for what you would like to hear, please email us at marketing@adeptuscpas.com. You can also find us at adeptuscpas.com online or follow us at Adeptus on social media. The views and opinions by the podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Adeptus. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice.